All right, so this is the third part of character texturing. This part's going to be very short because I'm actually doing this in a two-part with the rigging start. But I just wanted to go over some of the final touches on the texturing that I didn't mention last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess. So generally everything is the same, but this is the final textures, and you might look at it and be like, well, you did so much without actually showing us. But all of it is all the same stuff, and I just wanted to clarify that and just go through all the different aspects. I'll briefly mention some stuff that I did for the hair as well, because the video that I have on hair is a little dated and doesn't apply to the newer Krita versions. So I just want to quickly talk about painting a directional map. Okay, cool. So, what we have here, you'll notice that I changed the shoulder pad to be darker. I realized that this was actually supposed to be bronze when I was looking at my concept. I forgot. The bluer metals are just the buckles and stuff. And then we also have a gold metal as well. As for anything else, most of it is, again, the same. I just want to bring up things like perhaps gradients and using gradients and weathering and painting in additional ambient occlusion and stuff like that. So sometimes, like obviously out of the box, your ambient occlusion, if you're just using that to apply on the surface, isn't going to get you everything that you want. It's not going to make different aspects pop like you want necessarily. So these are things to consider and look out for. Let's see here. Where's a good example? I think the brown cloth is probably the best example, this brown fabric, because it has a bunch of apparently additional stuff, but it is really all the same. So let's see here. So we have our initial gradient. Oops. Oh geez. Sorry, it's lagging a lot. Because whenever you just open Substance, it tends to lag until you start moving things around. So this is a gradient, right? So this is the same kind of brown cloth. If we look at the mask here, it is applied along, come on, there we go. It's applied along all these surfaces, right? And this is the gradient that we've applied using a gradient mask, using, in this case, 3 linear gradients. Now, the reason there's 3 is because I have them on different parts of the body. So you can see here that I've actually added a gradient top down as well as bottom up. And the reason for that is just because this area on the leg was feeling very flat. So these are things that you want to keep in mind when you're texturing. Is you don't want to have like this really flat color, right? So if you look at this, like this feels like a really just solid same color along a large space and doesn't feel all that interesting. So I've added an additional gradient to kind of amp that up a little bit. Similarly on the skin, you can see that there's a little bit of a darkening here on the inner side of the leg. And this is just painted in manually because it's not a full gradient, because that's not what I wanted, because you can see the skin from up here to the bottom. And I didn't want to have a gradient that was starting like halfway through the leg, especially if the belt happens to move around and stuff like that. It will look weird. But for the cloth, it felt like the right choice. Anything else that I needed to mention? I think that's most of it as far as the cloth and the texture updates that I did off stream. We have the same kind of weathering, you know, just so that the using a curvature mask, anything that's, you know, rounded or pointed, it's going to get a little bit of a highlight as if the cloth has been worn away a little bit. Hey Lorna Wolf, I'm just going over some texturing stuff for the workshop, and we'll be touching on rigging in a minute. How are you doing? What else can I cover here? I think that's, yeah, that is most of it. It's just you know, applying additional gradients and trying to like break up the surface, which is the same thing we were doing with these you know, these little chunks of noise and dirt, right? So we have like these kind of like color breakup variants. Where's my dark brown fabric? That's bronze. There. Okay. So we had like here you can kind of see. It's very hard to see. It's super subtle. You can kind of see how the tint of. Oops, I ended up in the sword there. Hold on. You can see that the tint of the cloth kind of changes a little bit in some areas, based off of this mask, right? So the green is more obvious on my screen, but you're not going to see it. There's no way. But there's like little patches of green here, right? And that kind of just makes it so that the surface doesn't feel quite so flat. Okay, so that's about it for texturing here. I guess the horn too had a bunch of gradients. You can see I've done a whole bunch for the gradients here, right? So we have our 3D linear for the bottom of the horn. The tip I just painted because if I try to apply a gradient, it would just kind of apply on the whole horn, and I just wanted to apply to the tip a little bit, so I just painted that in. You can also do that with ambient occlusion as well. Like you could paint in some areas that you want to be a little bit darker, just to kind of break up the surface, right? So say like I wanted to have like a little bit of darkness here. Oops, not there. Right, like a little bit of darkness here or something. Oh, I'm painting white instead of black. Anyway, there we go. So yeah, if I wanted to be like darker there, I could be like, yeah, I want it to be darker, maybe like in the inside of the hair or something. You can do that, right? And that's stuff that you want to consider as well. It's just trying to break up the surface and not have a solid tone along the whole thing, because it's just going to feel very flat and boring. Yeah, okay, so that is the main stuff there. I think I mentioned this last week, but I broke up the scales a little bit. You can see I added little highlights on different areas of the scales, right? Same idea, it's just instead of a darkening, I used a highlight, and I just went in there and I just took a color, and all I did is it's just linear dodged, and I just painted in some little highlights. And that's it. As for the hair, I did want to go over Krita a little bit, because they changed how their normal painting brush works. It's a little different than it was before. And what you do here is I'm just gonna hide everything for now, just for the sake of demonstration. You'll notice I've done everything with like a base green, and this base green is a top to bottom color. So basically, this color will make the light travel this direction, right? Along anything that's in the UV space, right? I brought in a normal map so I can reference what part of the hair I'm painting on. It's just easier to see like the direction of the streaks if I have my normal map in there. The UVs weren't quite enough because they're in there, but you can't really tell like what direction the hair is moving without your sculpted streaks, right? So what I do is I create a new layer, and we're going to use the normal. Where do I select that again? Here we go. So if you click on these like 4 little icons, you can select your normal brush, and by default it's not going to work because it's going to be based off of brush tilt. And instead, what you have to be doing is you have to change it to be in stroke direction, right? So under tangent tilt, change it from tilt to direction, and it's going to reset every time you restart software, unfortunately. But that's what you have to do. And then what you do is I tend to mask off different areas that I want to texture. I always forget which one's the right one. I think it's this one. Yeah. Right. And you want to try to be very broad with your strokes, because the more noise you have, the worse things are going to look in the final, right? And then you just start painting in the directions of the hair, right? So this already might be too small. I used a bigger brush before, but you know, start with this and see how it feels. I might actually, I'm going to increase it a little bit. And just be very, very heavy-handed with this, right? It's not going to be super perfect, right? It doesn't have to be. You try to get as much of the noise out as possible, right? Like you can see a little bit of artifacting near the roots. That's kind of inevitable. Make sure I'm just kind of painting along with the hair, And this is going to be a nice directional map for us. Right? Obviously, I'm not going to paint this all now. We've painted it already, but I wanted to show you what the process is, because this is time consuming, right? And you're going to want to like go in here, and then you're going to jump over to Marmoset, and you're going to want to test it on your model as you're going, right? So to add it, you just basically go into you change your reflection mode to anisotropic, drop in your map, and then you can add a secondary reflection as well. I highly recommend a secondary reflection with a bit of an offset. Makes it feel more like hair if you have like a secondary highlight, which we can see here. You can see like how the bottom of the hair has a little bit of an extra highlight. That's good to make it feel like hair. Right? And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. Out of things that I didn't cover last week that I wanted to talk about. I just want to make sure that people don't look at this and say, oh, you did so much off stream, I'm never going to understand because you didn't show me. But really, it's all the same stuff. Like everything is broken down into the same layers as before, right? It has our base color, our gradient color, and then we have, additional darkening, which is where I kind of, this one is just because this material has a darker underbelly, right? So all I did was create it's the same thing. It has a base color and a gradient color that's darker, and I've just masked it, right? So it's just a bit of a darker red. Ambient occlusion, right? This is just using the map, and then if you want to paint in any additional ambient occlusion, you could, or paint out areas that you don't like, you can do it. And this is just a mask, right? Does she have a tail? She does have a tail, yeah. Yeah, that's about it. So I'm gonna stop the recording for the texturing portion. This essentially just covers everything that I wanted to talk about. Nothing big. I just want to mention it and make sure everyone isn't surprised by the jump in progress.